Hi everyone, thanks so much for waiting in the waiting room there. Nice to see you all joining. It'd be great if you could turn your video on so we can see you if that's possible, but no problem if not. It's just nice to see faces when we're running events like this one. Just to let you know that we are recording the event, so just to be aware of that. If you don't want to turn your camera on for that reason, that's absolutely fine, but like I said, it'd be great to see some faces. And we're just going to give it a couple more minutes to see if any more people join the session today. But yeah, it's great to see so many so far. And Annie's just popped some, we're calling them ground rules in the chat. It would be great if you could introduce yourself, say where you're from, give us a little about your organisation, and let us know who you are and maybe where you're joining from today. That would be nice to know.
Hello all, good to see you. Looking forward to when we can actually see each other. Josie, I've let people know that you need to leave early, so don't worry on that score. I can see Carl's with us. Welcome, Carl. New SAY member. Good to see you, Joe. I'm not sure who administrator is. I would go around and just doing it a quick intro. 10 seconds.
We can do, yeah.
Okay, so you've just introduced yourself, haven't you?
I didn't actually introduce myself, which is very
Go on,
poor of
Emily.
me. Yeah, so I'm Emily. I work at Big Society Capital. I'm Senior Communications and Engagement Officer, so working alongside Annie, who's also on the call, and Mel as well. I'll be co-hosting the session today with Ali, so really looking forward to hearing more from you all.
I'm Ali, Social Enterprise Yorkshire and Humber. Great to see you all on here. Hopefully we'll have some more joining. I'll go round my screen and ask people to introduce themselves. So Louise, you're next.
Hi, Louise Megson, charity consultant with my Revive Leeds hat on today, because I've been asked to come and talk to you a bit later on about my experience with finance.
Thank you very much, Louise. Adrian, over to you.
Hi everyone, so I'm Adrian Bean. I work for Key Fund and as the lead investment manager, and I shall tell you a little bit more about us later on this afternoon.
Brilliant. And across to Annie.
Hi everyone, nice to see you. I'm Annie. I'm the Digital Marketing and Communications Officer at Good Finance, so I'll be on hand to answer any questions or anything like that today.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Sean?
Good afternoon, Sean Fox, CEO of Legacy Sport and Sporting Age, two social enterprises based in Huddersfield, and I'll be talking a little bit about our social investment adventures.
Brilliant, thank you. Natalia?
Hi, Natalia from Big Issue Invest, investment manager, and I'll be able to talk to you about our investments.
Thank you very much. Mel?
Afternoon all, I'm Mel. I also work for Big Society Capital, but I've worked with Ali over a number of years. I am responsible for all of our work that's about trying to help social enterprises and charities work out whether social investment is for them, and I'm going to be talking later.
Thank you very much. Joe?
Hi there, I'm Joe Kent from Cloth Cats, which is a music community benefit company. We use music to support people and address things like mental health issues or loneliness or just creativity, really. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Josie?
Hi everyone, I'm Josie. I'm the General Manager of Northern Powerhouse Boxing Academy. We're the first female-led boxing club in the UK. We're a community interest company, and our aim is to provide a safe environment for anyone to come and train, either for boxing or just for fitness or for their own mental health.
Brilliant. And Linda, good to see you.
Hi, sorry, I missed your request for this introduction. What did you want from us?
Oh, just who you are and who you work for, don't worry.
Okay, so I'm Linda Glue and I'm the programme manager for Time to Shine, which is a lottery funded programme based within Leeds Older People's Forum for reducing loneliness and social isolation. And we're looking at developing a social enterprise to run a magazine called Shine.
Brilliant. And Carl, we can't see you, but we can see you. Is it possible to put your camera on, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort it out. It's having a bit of a
Don't
wobble.
worry. Don't worry.
Hi everyone, my name's Carl Parkin. I'm one of the directors from White Roads Education and Training. We're a new CIC based in Leeds. We have a number of aims and objectives that we're going to be working to. Yeah, so that's me.
Thank you. And Helen is the mysterious administrator. Are you able to get your sound on, Helen? Not sure on that one. She has put in the chat that she's just started in Gainsborough in Lincolnshire. Oh, no, she can't get the chat. She can't get a sound on, old laptop. Well, you're here. That's the main thing. Well done. So she started working with the Gainsborough Local Access Fund and has spent 20 years working in VSC support and development services. Brilliant. So we will start. We hope some other people will come along, but just in case, we want to get cracking because we don't want to be too far behind. So we're really glad you're all here. You've all got a copy of the agenda? Yeah, well, you have, because you've all linked on via the Zoom that the agenda was sent out on. So yes, if we can just ask that you keep your self muted if you're not speaking, it just helps with any background noise. And I will, we welcome any cats, dogs or anything that come along. I can more or less guarantee that my cat Roxy is bound to make an appearance. She usually does. So over to Emily.
Thank you, Ali, and great to see you all as well. Thank you for introducing yourself. It's always nice to put some names to faces and to roles as well. So like I said, I'm Emily, and I work at Big Society Capital in the social sector engagement team. And my role really involves me chatting to organisations like yourselves and running events like this one today to break down a lot of the complex jargon and language that is used so often across the social investment world. And we really want to make sure that social investment is relevant and meaningful to organisations like yours. And just to give you a little bit of background about me, before I joined the organisation, I actually worked in the charity sector myself. So I understand a lot of the challenges, the complexities and the pressure that charities and social enterprises are under to secure funding and finance to support long-term sustainability. And most importantly, I really value the importance of supporting organisations to have information at their disposal so that you can make really well-informed choices about the information that you have at your disposal in your financial toolkit. And that's really what brings us here today. And to give you a little bit more information about the Let's Talk Good Finance event, we bring together organisations who would like to learn more about social investment, and it's just a really good opportunity for you to hear about people who've taken on social investment, to learn from your peers and learn how other organisations have taken on investment to grow and expand and to kickstart sometimes what their organisation is doing. So we really bring learning opportunities to you through our brilliant Hear from a Peer speakers, and then you have the opportunity to hear from us brilliant social investors about how they support organisations to grow and to innovate as well. And just to say that even in this virtual world, we are really keen to make this a really relaxed and informal event. So like Ali said, if you have any questions or if you want us to confirm or to explain anything in more detail, there is a lot of jargon in the sector, and we do try our very best not to use acronyms. But if there's something you would like us to explain further, please don't be afraid to ask. And you can ask myself, Mel, Ali or Annie, anything you're not sure of at any point throughout the event. So just to quickly take you through the agenda for this session. So first up, we will hear from Mel about what social investment is. We then have our two brilliant Hear from a Peer speakers, Louise Megston from Revive Leeds and Sean Fox from Legacy School Sports CIC. And they'll be talking about their journey to social investment. And we call this the warts and all journey. We'll hear from them the good and the bad bits about their social investment journey and how they've used investment to grow their organisations. We'll then take a quick comfort break, importantly to get a quick cup of tea, and then we'll come back to hear from Natalia at Big Issue Invest and Adrian at Key Fund. And then from 4 o'clock, we've got some optional networking, so we can have a space just for more informal discussion. We might not need all of that time, bit of a smaller group today, but we can see how we get on. But please do feel free to stay back at 4 o'clock to have a more in-depth discussion if you would like to do that. Great, and so to kick off the first bit of the event today, we're going to run a Mentimeter poll with you. I'm not sure if you've used Mentimeter before, but if you haven't, it's a live polling platform that allows us just to ask you a couple of questions about why you decided to come along to this session today. So I think on the next slide, Annie, there is the code for the event, and it's a little tech tip. If you would like to scan that QR code, and you can do that using the camera on your phone if you have that handy, it'll take you straight to the Mentimeter, or I'm just about to share the link in the chat, and that will get you directly to the Mentimeter as well. And I'll just give you a couple of seconds to do that, and then I will share my screen so we can all see the Mentimeter as well. So as hopefully everyone is getting onto that. I see that we've got some people already joining, so I'll just give you a couple of seconds to use that QR code. Or like Mal said, yeah, go to menti.com and type in the code, or you can click the link in the chat. So lots of different options to get you to Mentimeter there. I think most people seem to be on there. So I will, if you stop sharing your screen, Annie, I can share mine and I'll show you the Menti. There we go. So hopefully, I think a couple of people have managed to get on so far. 3 people joining there, great. So yeah, if you just pop in why you decided to come along to the event today, we're just really keen to hear from attendees why they decided to come along to learn more about social investment. And again, like we always say, there's no right or wrong answer. We're just keen to know a little bit more from you why you decided to join. Yep, so people saying to gain ideas and for available finance, find out more about social investment and learn how to build sustainable models to carry our project forward. Really interesting. I'll just give you a couple more minutes to join the poll if you haven't done so. Yep, perfect. Thought it sounded interesting and something I don't know enough about, which is great. Always good to know that we have captured the interest and made social investment sound interesting. So that's always a really positive sign. And hopefully there'll be lots of opportunities throughout this session today for you to ask questions, to learn more, and to find out lots more tips and tricks about where you can find out how to navigate the world of social investment. I'm just going to move us on to the next slide here. So we're just really keen, again, to know on a scale of 1 to 10, how you would rate your knowledge of social investment at the moment. We're just really keen to know if you've got a little bit of knowledge, or if you feel like you're quite informed about social investment. Please just rate on the scale of 1 to 10 where you think your knowledge is currently at. And don't worry, we can't see any of the responses here. It is completely anonymous, so please do feel free to be honest. This event really is about learning and sharing knowledge, so it's great if you can be as honest as possible. And what we'll get is a cumulative score at the end to see whereabouts people are rating themselves. A 5 at the moment, that's good. Hopefully Mel's not responded to this because she's an expert and that's not fair. So
that's always worrying.
Yeah.
An expert. Ask me a tricky question, I won't know the answer. I'm sure there are loads of things I don't know the answer to.
Good stuff. So we've got about a 5 there, and 4 people have joined, so maybe give it 1 more second, and then we can, at the end of the event, what we always do is we ask you to rate your knowledge again to see if we've increased your knowledge and learning following the session that we have hosted. I think that's 5 people on, so that's great. So we've got about a 5 for knowledge, about midway, which is always good to know. So hopefully by the end of the session, like I said, we will have increased that knowledge even just slightly. That is great. Okay, so thank you so much for taking part in that Mentimeter. And like I said, any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask. And now I am delighted to hand over to Mel Mills, and she's going to chat to you a little bit more about what social investment is and how it can be a useful financial tool.
Thank you, Emily. That's great. Lovely. Thank you, Annie. Skip me along one. That would be great. Okay, so we always start this session just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we all understand what social investment is. I always feel I have to apologise for the speakers that do these things with me before, because they must have heard me say these things lots of times, but we have to do the good news and the bad news, okay? The good news is that it's flexible money that can work anywhere across the UK. The bad news is you have to pay it back with interest, but that's not necessarily bad news. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about that. But it is money that you need to repay, and it is also something you need to be sure what you want to do with the money. And I know that once you get some of those practical examples and have a chance to talk to Natalia and Adrian, it will all become more evident. However, there's a much easier way for me to try and do this. I've spent a lot of the last 6 years trying to explain social investment, and it can be tricky. So the best way for us to do this is to play you a really short video. It's about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, and I think it probably does it even better than I certainly can.
Across the UK, charities and social enterprises like yours are tackling some of society's biggest problems. Maybe you've set up a coffee business to give people the skills to get back into work, or are running a nursery and using the profits to support local parents. Whatever your mission, you'll need money to help with cash flow, to grow your organisation, or to buy an asset like a new building. You might even need finance to kick-start your new venture. And that money could come from traditional grants or donations, or as a loan from your local bank. One option is to get that money from a social investor. That social investor could be an organisation or an individual, and you can borrow their money or offer them shares in your organisation. But what makes a social investor different? Well, they don't just want to see a return on their investment. They want to see their money being used for good, helping you to keep delivering your social mission. Sound good? To see if it's right for you, check out goodfinance.org.uk.
Lovely, thank you very much, Annie. When we developed that short animation, we did all sorts of user testing, but I always think now that you know, as a parent, you spent far too much time with your children talking about social investment and social enterprise when they're able to spot one for you, and they were certainly part of our testing panel alongside many other thousands of people that have now watched that animation. But seriously, the great thing about the animation is it's available on Good Finance. So if at any time you want to explain to somebody else, or you want somebody in your organisation to do it, you can access that animation along with a suite of others at any time. Okay. So I said that social investment, how there was some good news that came with it. One of the challenges, if you like, with grants is that you're often restricted to needing to tick the box for the grant maker, and that could be based on outcomes or geography. And so the good news that social investment, it doesn't really matter whether you're based in the Highlands of Scotland or the lowlands down in Cornwall and Devon. Social investment can work for you. And the bit that I think we get asked all the time, what makes a social investor social, which went over on the video, is that a social investor won't tell you what difference they want you to make. They'll want to know, so you need to be able to articulate what difference the money they're going to lend you is going to have. And so being able to tell your impact story is really important. And that doesn't have to be really, really complex. It doesn't have to be shiny brochures or lots and lots of a very complex measurement. But it does mean that you need to be able to articulate what the difference that money is going to make. And so we know that social enterprises and charities are dealing with some of the most complex and challenging issues. And the other great news is that social investment works, whether it's about housing, employment and training, furniture reuse, financial inclusion, bakeries. There are all sorts of social enterprises and charities out there that have used social investment to help them create more impact. Okay, So this is where we start talking about the different. Do you remember back on that video, there was you might borrow a loan on one side, and then there's a picture of a cake, and you might give shares on the other side. So the simplest way to talk about social investment is that there are two different types. So debt or loans, that's what you normally hear it talked about, or equity, which is shares. Okay, so debt is essentially when an organisation just borrows money and pays it back, usually with interest over a period of time. And the easiest way for me to explain that would be in a personal context, like if you were taking on a loan for a car or something like that. Equity is when an organisation sells shares to an investor, so they own a percentage of the organisation. Now, of course, one of the biggest challenges with equity investments in the social sector is that many social enterprises and charities don't have shares that they can give away. So that's why you'll find the most common form of borrowing is debt. You might also hear things like blended finance, quasi equity, revenue participation. These are all different types of lending, and that's one of the reasons why we created the Jargon Buster. I do distinctly remember being at some events 6 years ago, early on in my journey into social investment, and spent an awful lot of time sitting in the audience thinking, I'm not really sure what they're talking about now when they're talking about mezzanine debt. So yeah, any of these terms you'll be able to find in our Jargon Buster. It also said in the video that there are two main ways that you can get investment from organisations. So it says here specialist social investment firms. So we've got a couple of those, Key Fund and Big Issue Invest here today. They're going to talk to you about what they do. Social banks, so people like Charity Bank and Unity Trust and Ecology Building Society. And also you have a range of grant making trusts and foundations, people like Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Esme Fairburn. And increasingly, a lot of those grant-making trusts and foundations are also, alongside their grants, starting to offer some types of repayable finance. You can also get investment from an individual in the form of something like crowdfunding or through community shares, which is often one of the most common forms of equity funding. Social investment tax relief, which enables high net worth individuals and retail investors are just people like you and I, people on the street, or angel investors. So the best way to reference angel investors tends to be like what you would see on the Dragon's Den, so sort of entrepreneurs who are putting up their own investment. One of the things I would say is that social enterprises and charities, we're all really passionate about the change that we make. So if we can get our heads around, we've got a business model that could take on investment and there's a way to repay the money, what we tend to want to do is to get from A to Z as quickly as possible. So we go, A, yes, I've got this business, I'm going to do these things, I could take out a loan, I need to borrow this amount of money, and who do I go and talk to? Well, there is a little bit in the middle, which is about what is the product by which you would raise that money. So if you're going to buy a building, you might want a secured loan. If you need working capital, you might need an unsecured loan. If you were doing a payment by results contract, it might be a social impact bond. So it's definitely worth checking out a little bit more about the different types of financial instruments that you might raise the money by. And the reason that's important is because not all social investors do the same thing. So that also helps you to work out who is the best social investors to start and talk to. Okay. So key considerations when you're thinking about whether social investment is right for you. What's the purpose? What do you need it for? And we often say that you can group the things that you might want to borrow money for into these sort of 4 buckets. So buying an asset, which I've talked about. We have lots of organisations that maybe buy bricks and mortar either to operate from or to let as a landlord. To maintain cash flow. So again, that's the most common form or need for social investment currently, where you're going to take on a contract perhaps, but you've got to put some investment in up front, maybe in terms of salaries or smoothing out until you get payment. So you might need to borrow money now so that you know you're going to receive money later. Kickstarting your business. Please note that I didn't say start your business. Now, it's not impossible to start your business and to get repayable finance, but it is more challenging because often that's where grant works best. So you can do your proof of concept, and then once you're sure that there's a market and a customer and you need to sort of just give that next push along, then social investment might be a way that you can do that. And then of course growth and innovation. We often talk about scale. It's not the only way that you can use social investment, but it definitely is one of the more recognized ways. Repayment, number 2. So this is really important. Is there an income stream with a surplus or a profit, or do you have enough margin? Okay, because that's what you are going to have to do. You're going to borrow money and you're going to have to repay it. And there might be a whole range of ways that you might get that income into your organisation. And most social enterprises and charities use these mixed economies, so have a number of different income streams. So you might have government or local authority, public contracts. You might get money from rental income, whether that's as a landlord or as a perhaps a serviced office or events venue. You might have membership fees and people pay to have some kind of service from you, and you might have also have some kind of donation or grant income. It's not normal or usual that a social investor would accept all of that as income, but they might be prepared to accept some of that as towards the mix of income that you could confidently expect to receive that would help to repay any lending. And then of course trading, which comes from a whole range of different sources, whether that's business to business or business to customer. And finally, back to the impact question, what social impact will you create? What's the difference your money's going to make? And it's really important that you can tell that story. We often say there are no numbers without stories and no stories without numbers. So it's really important that you think about how you're going to measure that, and also only measure the things that are important to your organisation. We definitely don't want to make an industry. It needs to be relevant and it needs to be proportionate to the time that it takes. Okay, so I'm going to whiz through very quickly what the research shows. So it's not probably a surprise that almost a third of charities said that more funding was the most important tool that they could help them to increase their impact. Around a quarter of charities have set up a trading subsidiary, showing the move towards more commercial models. And also, this hasn't changed massively over the last 8 years, but still 43%, I mean, it's not far off a half, is it? Say access to finance is the biggest obstacle in sustainability and growth. And that includes both grants and also debt and equity finance. Often the biggest barrier is more about time and capacity and internal expertise. Okay, and then just finally, before we get to the last slide, I think it's just that reflection that even during a pandemic, when we've had such a gap in terms of lost revenue and also lost funding from charities, and money has been diverted to the pandemic, there is still growth. And there are still, for instance, the government schemes like the CBIL scheme, Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, which there has been a social sector equivalent through the Recovery and Resilience Loan Fund, have seen a increasing pipeline of applications to help organisations. So I think, if I'm honest, there was a moment back in April last year when I wondered how much of borrowing money might be relevant going forward. How far would it set us back? But we've not seen that at all. Still really increasing appetite to find out more about how social investment can help to support social enterprises and charities.
One second. Yes, I'm there. I'm with you now. Hi, Louise Megson, Revive Leeds. Yeah, we've got social investment. We've had social investment several times over the years. When we first started Revive Leeds, it was one of the first things we did. We went to the key fund, said, hi, can you give us some cash? They said yes. We were gobsmacked, and it was an easy process, and we set off quite merrily with that. Now, it's quite unusual, I think, way back when we first started getting loans in. It was interesting because our biggest problem back then were charity trustees who didn't actually think that loans were a good idea. And quite often they still don't. As a consultant to other charities, I'm constantly running up against outdated thoughts around borrowing money. They're quite happy to go borrow their own money for a car, but they don't seem to want to do it for the business, which is ridiculous, basically. If we've got a good business model, why on earth wouldn't you borrow the money? We originally explored the loan and grant elements of the key fund back then, and it actually worked very well for us. And in a couple of instances, particularly this just latest one, we've actually gained financially on taking out the loan versus the grant. So we used the loan calculator. It was easy. It gave the board a really good sense of security. We realised the benefits, and obviously the benefits that the social investor needs as well, that's to be taken into consideration. Luckily, it did fit our model of giving employment, as it happens. So we went off to design our financial proposal. Now, as it happens, Keith will give you this great little calculator, which we use to model the expansion, and it's currently the expansion of Revive that we've gone back to Key Fund for this time. So we looked at the repayments, etc., and I'll just share our model with you. Can everybody see that? Right, okay. The item highlighted in blue is your critical things. Obviously, the rest of it is just our financial model for our expansion for a new site in Kirklees, as it happens. And we have the loan of the 28,000, which is built in with the long side, which is a grant of 7,000 with a total repayment of 35. And as you can see from our repayments at 6%, we actually repay an interest-free loan and gain a few quid at the end of it. So that's worked very well. It also makes it so that when we went to the board with the financials, as you can see, it's bringing us in an estimated profit, which is actually quite low for Revive. However, we do hope that that's a conservative model. So that was that. I always only go for the 30 to 60,000. I'm not one. I know you can borrow up to 4 million, I believe, with the charity bank, but it's not something that I'd ever think that would be a great idea for us. Like to be conservative, like to stick between 30 and 60k. We always tend to go to Key Fund. It's our go-to place because I think Key Fund hopefully know us now, and they know that we always pay back. Even in times when one or two of the charities have got into trouble and maybe have had struggled to repay, they've always been really good with us to actually put us on the back burner and stop repayments for a bit until we can actually get ourselves back on our feet. And yeah, that was always a really, really great piece of work that we did with them. I think the biggest thing of warts and all is make sure you take their advice. Quite often you've got to remember that they are bankers. I'm not a banker, I'm a fundraiser. I know how to do the social benefits, etc., etc. But there's on times, you know, when I've had the Key Fund guys turn around to me and say, well, I think you might be asking either for a little bit little or a little bit too much. So took their advice and it's always seemed to have worked for us. Keeping in contact with our social investor, that was critical, giving in our timely feedback and progress and good news stories, etc., etc. And in the end, it's just always take out a loan. It's a really, really good way of having some money in your bank account, which gives you a great little buffer and seems to be very easy to repay. And that's my story.
So basically, yeah, Sean Fox, CEO of Legacy Sport, will start with today, based at the John Smith Stadium in Huddersfield. And I'm going to talk about our relationship as well, mainly with Key Fund, but other social investors. I'll tell you a little bit about our backstory. So I was a PE teacher by trade and saw the good that PE sport and health programs could do. So in 2011, I took redundancy. People thought I was mad to set up a CIC, Legacy School Sport CIC, that developed PE sport and health programs for young people, mainly in primary schools. Basically, I'd read the Business Link books, I'd read all sorts of theory about setting up a business, but what I wasn't prepared for was the month-to-month challenges that a lack of cash flow really brought up. People had talked about cash flow, but until you're actually living and breathing the business and you're 3 days away from payday, it's really difficult to understand just how important that buffer, as Louise spoke about, is. You know, it's absolutely vital to the lifeblood of businesses and social enterprises. So we actually managed to survive the first 12 months. And then after that, I started to look about and see how we could expand legacy sport. And one of the real opportunities that became available to us was to deliver something called bikeability. And just to give you a little bit of information, bikeability, it's cycle training for the 20th century, and it's basically something that makes a massive difference to the independence of young people in terms of their health and well-being, their ability to cycle to school, cycle with friends, cycle for leisure. So I started doing a little bit of research, and in Kirklees, what was happening at the moment was that this is in 2011, 900 places were actually being delivered when I knew that there were 5,000 young people in 1 year group, and we could actually get funding from the Department for Transport to deliver those places. So what I did was communicate with all the 150 head teachers in Kirklees to see if they would be interested in having more young people be part of the programme. So a little bit of a research project. We then tried to find if we could get some investment, because we didn't have enough funding then to employ more instructors, to get a fleet of bikes, to get the safety equipment, to get storage places, etc. So we did a little bit more research. We found that there was a real desire for head teachers and schools to get involved with bikeability. We then went to Key Fund back in 2011 to see if there was any social investment available. And as a couple of people have said already, its debt, it absolutely terrified me. We set up the social enterprise with a small pot of £5,000, and we were looking at a 15k, it was actually blended, so it was an 11k loan and 4k grant, which was, when you put the two together, it's actually very preferential interest rates. But that allowed us to buy the things that we needed to deliver the bikeability. And that's what really was the making of legacy sport. After that, we grew rapidly, because not only could we service 70 schools, we grew the whole programme within Kirklees from 900 places in 2011-12 to, in 3 years, 4,500 places being delivered. So we were delivering more, we were getting more grant funding from the Department for Transport, we were getting some payment for schools, but also we were creating really strong links with schools and developing our reputation because we'd had that initial investment. And that really is the pattern to our social investment over the years. We have, as I mentioned, developed this relationship with Key Fund, and the way it's worked is basically there's been 4 steps on throughout the process as we develop new programs. So we've come up with an idea on how we can have more impact for young people in primary school settings, how we can get them moving more, how we can get them eating the right things, developing healthy habits, etc. And we've come up with the idea for a program. We've then gone ahead and done a small scale, very affordable proof of concept. We've then taken that proof of concept, that idea, to our investors, usually Key Fund, and said, we think this has got some legs, it's got some mileage, we think we can roll it out and scale it up. And then when we've got the investment, we're then able to market the product. And as a couple of people mentioned, it's then absolutely vital that we can generate enough income to pay the loan and make profit. We've actually had 4 different programs over the years after that 2011 initial investment. So we've had a program called which was the second social enterprise that Ollie's already mentioned, and that's more of an EdTech, an educational technology program, where we look to develop movement skills. Again, it was the same process, that proof of investment, and then we went and said we think there's something in this, and Key Fund lent us some money to scale that up within Kirklees and West Yorkshire. We had a different program called Fit for Force, which is all about getting large numbers of young people moving, getting out of breath, improving cardiovascular fitness. And more latterly, our latest investment is for a program called Maths on the Move, which is, again, all our programs are about getting young people moving, but it's about active learning. So getting those young people who are not really in tune with learning maths or English in traditional ways, but might be able to learn in different ways outdoors or through moving about and little challenges, etc. So the relationship with Key Fund has been, like I say, an extremely positive one over the last 10 years. And it's always followed those steps: the proof of concept, the seeking investment, the marketing the products, and then the generating income to repay the loans. We've had loans of 40,000, 20,000 and 24,000 after the initial one that I mentioned earlier. And we've now only got one loan outstanding. I think we've got about 18 months left to pay. So we might look at further loans further down the line as we look to create additional impact. I'll just mention a little bit about Sporting Age separately. We grew Sporting Age after that initial investment by Key Fund to such an extent that we realised that although legacy sport was always going to work with schools and organisations within West Yorkshire, we thought that Sporting Age's EdTech product, which was an app, an online platform that gave young people an age that allowed them to access appropriate resources to develop movement skills, we thought it had potentially national reach. So it was actually another organisation that got in touch with us. They must have heard about us through our marketing, and an organisation called Sporting Capital, based in London, but also got an office in Leeds, came to see if we were interested in taking more social investment on board for Sporting Age. Again, we did a lot of research, and we actually managed to get a 9k grant fund working with Sporting Capital as part of the Reach Fund, and that allowed us to do this real detailed piece of work to see if Sporting Age was viable. We put a really detailed business plan together, we put the cash flow forecast together, etc. So we did all the research and all the homework before we got to the stage where Sporting Capital were happy that we'd got a model that was likely to gain traction and national reach, and obviously more impact for young people. So again, positive stories with both our social investors. I'm not going to lie, it's been, for Sporting Age, it's been a challenging 12 months over the last 12 months with the lack of access to schools, etc. But we really think that we've got a solid grounding to move it forward when things start to open up in the next few months. If I can just nail down a couple of really simple positives and negatives, taking Key Fund as an example, we feel that now we have a relationship. They understand us, they understand what we're trying to do, the impact that we're trying to make, and as Louise said, they trust that we're going to pay back. The rates that we've had are either preferential rates or that blended, some grant funding combined with the loan, which has been really, really useful moving forward. And the human contact, I think we all know that, the big banks just want to know that you're going to pay their money back, but it feels like Key Fund have a genuine interest in us making a difference and somebody being there on the end of the phone. For example, Karen, who's my main contact at Key Fund, as soon as the pandemic hit, was on the phone and talking about, can we help you in any way, shape or form? Would a payment holiday help throughout this challenging period, etc. Which, there's no way Lloyds Bank would have been doing that the morning after the pandemic hit. So that relationship, again, is absolutely vital. I suppose the only negative I can think of is the paperwork. But even if you were, working with a bank, there'd be some element of paperwork, and it's got much less onerous over the years. The paperwork now is really straightforward. As a couple of people have mentioned, it is social investment, so quite rightly they want to know the difference that we're making to young people, but it's really manageable, and like I say, there's always that good communication that helps us to get past anything that we don't understand and be able to provide that in a concise fashion. So like I say, I'd echo what Louise said. It is debt, but it's if used correctly and you've done your research and done your homework before and have a good, good communication and relationship, it can be very positive in helping organisations to grow. I'll hold it there and take any questions.
Thank you, Mel. Hello, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to join you and speak about Big Issue Invest. I've got some slides, so I'll go through the slides. I have a terrible habit of speaking very quickly, so please forgive me and wave to slow me down. And if there are questions, I'm very happy to answer those. So Big Issue Invest is part of the Big Issue Group. For those of you who know the magazine, it's celebrating its 30th year this year. We also have a foundation, and then the third arm is Big Issue Invest, which is what I'm going to talk about. We have a big range of loans that we offer clients, and what this slide shows you is that range. So the very first one, the early stage startup venture capital, is a program that doesn't run on a regular basis. So we raise funds to run that programme, and it's currently running in Scotland. So Emily, if you know anybody, you could send them. And the next tranche is actually also in Scotland. And that's where we work with fairly new business that's looking to scale. And it's quite unusual in that it's not a normal programme for us. But if you are interested in the CSV programme, then do contact us and we can let you know where that programme's running. Really, I'm here to talk about the second column, which is capital that we lend out from £10,000 to £250,000. But before I talk about that, we do also have another programme which lends up to 3 million. That's CEIF 1 and CEIF 2, and we have a separate one for housing in the London area, which also lends out to up to 3 million. Forgive me. So I thought it would be easy to explain how we work, or the types of models that we have. So I decided to talk about some of the, we have a range of programs, and each program is a different fund that comes to Big Issue Invest, and they have a set criteria that indicates what and who we can lend to. So I've chosen in this particular slide the Access program, which is aimed at women in business, ethnic minority groups, high-risk programs and regional, so not the usual southeast of England, not the London area, but actually working in other areas. And this program has, we tend to do an average interest rate of 7.5%, and that is a fixed rate, that's not above the base rate. So when you talk to us and you ask us what your monthly repayments will be, we can give you a guide as to what that will be. And on average, it's about 7.5%. Because we have a range of loans, they vary in term from 1 year to 7 years, and we work right across England. I chose 3 organisations to talk to you about because they give a nice variety of the type of loans that we've done, and these are all loans that I've done, so I find it really easy to talk about them. So the first one that looks like a tree-shaped head is the Mentis tree. Who has been a speaker on this programme before, and she's been fabulous, Sue. The Mentis tree is really interesting, and it takes me back to a comment that Sean, you made earlier, which I thought was really valid, and that is that the Mentis tree offers counselling services to children, and they get paid by the local authority 90 days in arrears, and that makes managing their working capital really difficult. So what they did was they borrowed £50,000 from us for a 3-year term, and even though they could afford to pay us back, they actually kept the loan and made small payments, because what it enabled them to do was keep the cogs of the business turning. So that money sitting in their bank made more difference to them than it did paying it back to us. Viva is really interesting. That is a theatre group in Cambridgeshire, and what they did was they wanted money to buy a property. They bought a totally crumbling to pieces building that they have now turned into a theatre, and they worked really hard. They raised grants, and we transferred that loan over to their local authority, who was able to do almost 0% for them. But what we were able to do was to get them that building. They were able to purchase the building before somebody else could get it, so that was excellent. And the reason I've chosen Sensio, which is a community leisure centre, is because for any of you who use leisure centres, they have had a really tough time at the moment. And Sensio approached us for 150,000. Actually, they approached us for 200,000, and we did a co-financing deal with ICOF. And the money was for them to refurbish their building. But the other reason that I've included them is that as the leisure centre has been closed, they have had no source of income. So what we've been able to do is restructure their finance so that they don't lose their livelihood, and that they can still keep the business. And when things get back to normal, then we'll all get back to normal with repayments. Okay. So I thought it would be useful to explain how we work. So if you're interested in a loan, the first thing we want to do is to have a conversation with you. And that conversation gives us an idea of the sort of business that you have, your social impact, and what it is that you want to borrow the money for. We don't ask people to do anything extra. We're only asking you for all the things that you would normally have. We can get information from Companies House. So if we can get that from there, we will do. But we want to know that you understand how the finances of the business work. That's really important. We want you to tell us about your social impact, and we believe that you can tell us about you can articulate that better than a consultant can do that. So don't feel that you've got to race off and pay thousands of pounds for a consultant to do some sort of social impact review for you. You are probably the best placed person to talk to us about that. We always try to make a visit. However, during COVID, that has been really difficult. So we have done Zoom calls, and then I have just recently been catching up with some visits. But we like to do a visit. We like to meet you because you are a big part of that particular investment, but also we like to see what you do. It's important for you to understand that we invest in people, your social impact, and your financials. They make a big difference as to how the application goes forward. So we'll do an initial assessment within a week, and then thereafter between 2 and 8 weeks, depending on how quickly you can get information to us processing the due diligence, that money can be with you within 8 weeks. And that is all I'm going to share with you. Now, I've got a different name on my last slide. It's my colleague, Kevin Lloyd-Evans, and that's because I won't be around to take your call, but there will be someone at Big Issue who will be able to do that. That's the end of that. I will escape from there. And
Okay, so hopefully we can see that. Hello to everybody. I do know most people on the event today, and I don't really feel like I need to say anything after Louise and Sean have been on. But thank you for them for all the positive remarks that they've made. So I'm Adrian Bean, as we say, lead investment manager at the Key Fund. And all I want to do really is just give a quick overview of Key Fund and what we do. Some of the information is very similar to what Natalia's just been through. So Key Fund is a social investor. We operate right across most of the UK, from sort of Northampton upwards, really up to the borders of Scotland. But we are based down near Meadowhall, so we are very, very local. Been going 21 years. We're a not-for-profit. And as social investors are, we are impact driven. So we will invest in organisations wherever we can see a strong social impact being created, community spirit enhanced, social inclusion. And we also operate within the cultural sector as well, for arts, music, museums, theatres, that sort of thing. And what we do is we provide funding really where mainstream lenders won't go. So some of the stuff that we do is much more high risk, much higher risk than the banks and other mainstream funders will provide. And we do it at reasonable rates as well, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But what we do provide is, as we've talked about earlier on, blended finance. So that is a mix of loan and grant. And again, I'll give you a feel for the sort of grant part of it as we go through. So I'm not going to produce loads of slides. That's not what I'm about. But just to give you an idea of what we can fund. So anything up to 300,000 if it's for property. And that would be a secured facility as a standard sort of commercial mortgage. And everything else really is up to 150,000. And everything else really encapsulates everything else. So there's very, very little that we won't do. So we can do startups, we can do cash flow lending, asset purchases, new equipment, paying salaries, you name it, we can usually fund it. So we're not really limited in what we can do. And as Mel says, the average just seems to always work out about £50,000, but it's anything from 5,000 upwards up to those numbers. So anything from 5 to 150, typically bigger property loans because of the price of property now, up to 300,000. And if the client wants more than that, we can co-fund in the same way as Big Issue Invest can. So we might go in with, say, a charity bank who might fund 60% of a property purchase, and we'll put the 40% in as an example. In terms of how long we can lend over, anything from about 1 month up to, for property, up to 15 years. But typically, most of what we do is sort of sub 5-year term. So it's whatever the client wants, but most of it is up to usually about 5 years. But the bigger stuff sometimes is obviously over a longer period to help affordability. One thing to mention is we can only support incorporated organisations. So unincorporated organisations where there are just sort of members, we can't unfortunately do that. But incorporated organisations, so the usual charities, kicks, etc., fall within our remit. And I mentioned about the blended finance. It's changed fairly recently in that we can now put in anything up to 30%, if it's eligible, anything up to 30% of the loan amount by way of grant, which is quite a big slug of grant monies to go in alongside the borrowing. And obviously that makes the cost of that borrowing significantly cheaper because of that grant going in. But rates are anything from about 3.5% up to about 6.5%. So on the basis that most of what we do, apart from the property facilities, most of what we do is unsecured. So 6.5% for an unsecured facility. And when I say unsecured, benefit for the board and the members, they have no personal liability for the funding. We lend to the organisation, not to the individuals. And therefore, it might help boards if they understand that they are not personally liable for that borrowing. So no guarantees and usually no security. As I say, anything from 5,000 upwards. And we are flexible in the way in which we do it. So sometimes we will do a capital repayment holiday for organisations, for example, if it's a startup, so that it gives them 2, 3, 4, 5 months in order to get the feet under the table and start generating some income before they start the repayments. And as was mentioned by Sean, first thing that we did when COVID struck is we went out to our clients and said, look, don't worry about repayments. And some clients are still not fully repaying their facilities, and we're quite comfortable with that. We understand what the situation is. In terms of process, it usually starts with a chat with me. I tend to deal with most of the incoming inquiries. The client then completes the application form, submits the business plan and the cash flow forecast alongside that. And then what I do is I allocate an investment manager who can work locally with the client. Sean mentioned Karen. So Sean is in Huddersfield, Karen lives in Huddersfield, so it's ideal to match the two of them up. And then they can build that relationship up. We are relationship driven, and we can provide that one-to-one support over a period of time. And that is how we seem to get repeat clients coming back to us in the same way as both Revive Leeds and Legacy Sport have done in the past. In terms of timescales, from an application coming in to the funds actually being in the bank account, we have turned them around in 2 weeks before, where it's been urgent, but usually I would suggest the average is about 8 weeks. We will move at whatever pace the client wants, but usually it's around about 8 weeks from the application coming into the funds going into the bank account. And what I want to do really, that's the bones of it. That's as complicated as it gets. But I just want to give you a feel for the sort of clients we help. So these are just a random example of the sort of clients that we help. So we help big clients, small clients, as I say, anything from 5,000 upwards. So the first one there, Autism Plus, they are based in Doncaster and Sheffield, big organisation, big charity, and they provide support with housing, care and employment for autism sufferers. And they required quite a sizable spend in order to totally install a brand new software system. So we supported that over a 3-year term. Healy City Farm, as the name suggests, it's based in Sheffield and it is a city farm. And they they struggled a little bit, but then a new CEO came in and they wanted to upgrade their IT, refurbish their cafe, and put some working capital in. So we did that. We provided a loan and grant for them, and we put a 15-year term on that. They were also a previous client, so they'd come back to us more than once. Growing Better, much smaller organisation based in Leeds, an urban farm promoting healthy eating. And again, loan and grant put in there to support expansion. They were doing really well and really have grown significantly through COVID. They're one of the few sort of sectors where COVID in some respects has enabled them to grow. And we provided that mix of loan and grant, the blended finance, over a 5-year term. A few more examples. Lamproom, that's a theatre based in Barnsley, and they were struggling with their bar area. They couldn't get people in sufficient numbers to generate the income that could have been generated at the before and after and during the breaks in the productions. So we provided them some finance over a 5-year term, again, mix of loan and grant, in order to refurbish their bar area, and they've made a really, really good job of it, and then that enhances their income at the same time. Seagulls, another mix of loan and grant, as most of them are that we do, over a 3-year term to fund employee salaries, marketing and some cash flow. They recycle paint, surplus paint, based in Leeds, so many people will already know them. And again, they are another client that has used it on more than one occasion. Opal, older people's action in the locality. Again, a repeat client. They've had several facilities from us, wanted to refurbish part of some of the rooms within their premises, part of their premises, and we provided the grant funding and loan funding over a 7-year term. And Diversify Matters, based in Rotherham, loan and grant over 5 years, and they deliver diversity and inclusion training for schools and businesses. So obviously being impacted by COVID. But all of these organisations doing really well, many of which have repeat clients, as both Louise and Sean are. And that sort of suggests to us that we do get something right. If clients are looked after properly, they will come back to us. If you don't look after them properly, they'll go somewhere else. But that's how we work. We develop the one-to-one relationships. We're close without being in their pockets, as it were, and we're trying to help and support wherever we can. So that was just to try and give you a feel for the sort of examples of clients. They're all based in and around Yorkshire. We have funded community pubs, we have funded theatres, we've funded museums, we have funded an alpaca farm. That was an interesting one. So very, very diverse type of client that we get, and that's what makes my job so interesting. Very quick whistle-stop tour there of what Key Fund does and how we work. Anybody who wants to talk to me, my details are there. I'll leave them up for 2 seconds. So if you need them, scribble them down, but we are on the website. If you need to contact us, just give us a call and we will happily chat through with you. And that's it for me, unless anybody's got any questions.
Lovely, thank you. So yeah, I have we tend to cover most of these during the discussion, but I think it's always a really good way to bring everybody back, which is I said that I think we've run around about 60 of these Let's Talk Good Finance now, and we always have our Hear from Peer speakers, and these 7 lessons learned are the ones that come through loud and clear every time we have a Hear from a Peer session. So I thought I'd just recap them. So number 1, social investment is not benevolent money. You know, you've got to pay it back. It's going to be paid back with interest, but I think you've heard a whole range of different business models about how that actually can be put into practice, and it can work from small organisations or small amounts of money as well as large with lots of repeat borrowing. I think once people get confidence, they feel like they can do it again. Impact matters. It definitely matters why the social investor is going to lend you the money. They want to know what the difference is going to make. So whether that's creating housing for again, women in domestic violence, or whether it is for younger people to support their physical and their mental health. There's a whole range of different outcomes that it could be for. So telling your social investor what the difference their money will make is key. It's about much more than the money. Well, we've heard that one, I think, lots of times today, whether it's about the relationship, the support, understanding, refinancing or renegotiating the initial investment so that it works for the business model. There's a whole load of flexibility that seems to be far more than we would expect or anticipate, maybe from a high street bank, for example. Honesty is always the best policy. Well, you heard, I mean, in this particular situation with the pandemic, you heard that the social investors were ringing up their investees to see how they were and to offer help and support. But most social investors, we know that the organisations they lend to, when you create a business plan, you do it on the best assumptions. Well, life isn't always like that. It doesn't always go according to plan. So if things don't go according to plan, it's definitely worth to tell your investor. Don't think, oh, well, I won't say anything this month and hopefully we'll be able to make repayments next month. A problem shared, they say, is a problem halved. And that's definitely what I've heard from many organisations that have borrowed money and found that things have needed to change along the way. Why isn't it cheaper if it's social? Actually, we didn't get any questions particularly about cost. Both of our case studies that I hear from our peer speakers were talking about the fact that the rates that they were being offered investment seemed to work with their business models, so that was great, and they thought they were competitive. But it doesn't always follow that social investment is cheaper because it's social, and usually investment is related to risk. So how likely is it the investor is going to get their money back? What I would say is it's definitely important that you understand where the money's coming from that you're being lent, what kind of risk profile that your investor thinks that they're going to get when they're lending to you, who is in the market, so who are the potential options of people that could lend to you. And then you can use something like our cost of capital calculator resources, and that was actually inspired by Natalia's idea. And then also we had reference to the great cash flow forecasting and some of the documents that come alongside that from Keyfund, which you can find on Good Finance. Due diligence isn't fun, but it does make your business better. I'll crack my normal joke here, which is that I've only found one person, a lady who runs a social enterprise in Nottingham, who actually enjoyed due diligence. Everybody else I've said, and Sean definitely repeated this, is getting all the paperwork together and doing the reporting is probably not your favourite bit, but it is important. And a social investor will only lend you the money if they think that that is the right thing to do. And it always takes longer than you think. So we've heard, that social investors can be responsive and they can turn things around quickly, but I would never leave it until you need the money in the bank next week. There are credit committees to go through. There is information that the social investor will need. And to some extent, the pace that they can go will be dictated by how much time you've got to be able to get the things ready that they need. And we often say that social investment shouldn't be the place you go to as a means of last resort. This should be, as I said at the beginning, another tool in your toolbox. But those 7 lessons learned are ones that come up time and time again, and they always resonate for me.